doing a review on one of his recent videos talking about foreign women ain't no better. And so it's a video talking about for guys who are looking for overseas relationships, thinking, are American women and and women that live overseas any different? And I would say on the base, hypergamy, of course, is always going to be there. If you're in shape, if you have money, I mean, that's going to carry you basically anywhere you go. But I would definitely say, having done a lot of traveling, especially not recently because of the pandemic, but for 17, 18, 19, I was doing a lot of traveling because my goal is over the next couple of years is to live overseas. So I spent quite a bit of time traveling, end up settling on different places on Latin America where I was interested in because I'm Hispanic. So I speak the language. But the most important thing was that was obviously creating passive wealth here, working in the city. I do live in Manhattan. I've been here for 8 years. Spent a lot of time living in the city, living alone, going out on my own, excuse me, traveling. I just spent quite a bit of time traveling on my own. I just living in Manhattan on my own, not having, many friends that lived in the area. I spent a lot of my time going out to the bars and clubs on my own, and then wanted to see what it was like traveling to different countries, seeing what the nightlife was like. So that was basically the premise, moving forward. And so he states some points that I did want to touch on because I'm sure that there are maybe some people who are interested in maybe meeting somebody abroad. Are things better abroad? I'm interested in maybe in having relationships or pursuing having children. Am I wasting my time, thinking, am I going to find it any better in another country? Let's check out the
A lot
video.
of guys want to do overseas dating. And the reason guys are thinking this is because guys have this illusion that women overseas are so great and American women are so bad.
Well, I would say for most of us who have done a lot of dating, I've done a lot of dating here in the city. I should say I've done a lot of sleeping around. I should say occasional dating, but for the most part, it's very different in America because one, if you just look at the statistics, speaking, you have rampant obesity in the country. So that makes a huge difference primarily for women. Because even if women are overweight, they will typically still look for men who are in shape. Whereas if you look, especially for minority men, I see a lot of minority Black and Hispanics that will be in shape. You can see them, they're well fit. They look like they work out, and they still date these women that are overweight. And it's because that's what's in the community. So when that's the only thing that's in the community, people will tend to basically pick whatever is available, especially because unlike unlike women, men can typically sleep around with individuals that they're not really all that interested in and then keep it moving, whereas women typically don't operate that way. Women are typically, especially if they're a good looking woman, are typically looking for the higher tiered men who are in shape, have a career, a job, a business, etc. Right? Those are the ones that they're typically looking because they're looking to match. They're looking to match with someone. They're looking to date someone long term. Typically, most of these women are looking for long term relationships, whereas most of the men typically have no problem sleeping around. That's of course can be seen basically anywhere within the globe. You can find that.
Guys, the problem is not America. The problem is feminism.
And I would say that's true to an extent. I'll go into it in a
Do
bit.
y'all guys understand that? Feminism. Now, this is what feminism has done to the female psychology. Feminism has told women you should date, multi date, just like men. You should date 10 guys just like men do. That's what we do. That's what men used to do. I mean, men still do it. Women didn't used to do that because it was.
So now I would say from looking at having been in the dating market for many years now, I would say that was probably the biggest downfall of what caused the dating environment to be the way it is that women of course didn't like the double standard, and I of course don't agree with the double standard. Some people will agree that if you sleep around as a man, that it doesn't have an impact on your ability to have a relationship. And I would say 100% that it does, because you're so used to hopping around from one woman to the next. You never really look at the person and really kind of go through thick and thin. The moment someone gives you kind of a little slack, you just keep it moving, and then you just jump to the next one. And that was one of my biggest problems. My friends always used to make fun of me when I said I was dating somebody, and it was, oh, who you dating for the weekend. And it was typically because most of my relationships were really, really short. Um, Especially because I grew up in the church. And so when I left the church and I started dating outside of the church, a lot of what I came in contact with, were things that inwardly, in terms of the values I had grown up believing in, obviously I wasn't finding, going out outside of the church, and people were just, sleeping around, and this was the norm. Whereas if you grew up in the church, you might not see this. And so when you go from that one extreme and then you go to the other extreme where you're just like going all out, you're dating nonstop, you're sleeping around, you realize really quickly that there's nothing out here except that. And I would say that was probably one of the biggest issues, where men started sleeping around more, men who had left the church, and then the whole dynamic of communities changed, because now, instead of having men being leaders within churches, now you had men more on the outskirts of the church, or maybe not even attending. And then, of course, the church became predominantly feminized for that reason, because men left, not because the church changed to be more feminist, is because there was just literally no men within the church. And so the dynamic of the church life and communities changed. And that's one of the things I kind of disagree with him, which the only way that women would change, and the laws were changed as a reflection of men, because men were going out there sleeping around. And we all know that, yes, women do need men, whether they need men through the government, and the government basically extracts resources from men, or there's actually a man in the house providing. In either scenario, no matter what, women need men. And so when men started sleeping around and, in essence, abandoning the role that they typically fulfilled, which was the provider role, we started to see women who basically abandon their role. One, women are a reflection of what men are. That's just a reality. I think every person who is a red pillar agrees that women adapt to the environment that we put them in, right? So like they say, beta bucks and alpha Fs, right? So a woman will make rules for one, and then she'll abandon those rules for the other, depending upon the environment that she is put in. And that's just a reality of what we see today. The dating market, in terms of what we see today, is as a result of the environment that men nowadays that sleep around all the time have basically put women into that role. Because if there were good women out there, most of these guys that go out there have the mentality that if she's not sleeping with me, then she must be sleeping with someone else. If you've listened to AMS, or if you've listened to any other person who is a red pill content creator, this is typically the information that they typically give out, is that if she's not sleeping with you, if she's making rules for you before you can sleep with her, then she's more than likely sleeping with someone else. So if every man has that mentality, and what the end result is going to be, is that more women are just going to end up sleeping around, because this is the environment that they put them as, basically a catch-22. Because like I said, if she's a good woman, and you mentally think, well, if she's not sleeping with me on the first, second, or third date, well, then she's sleeping with someone else, and I'm just a beta who's basically taking out and providing for her. And as long as you have that mentality, you would never be able to have a relationship.
Unladylike for a woman to be dating 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys at one time. What a woman would do when I was coming up, guys, is if she was dating a guy, and say you met her, even if they wasn't even in a committed relationship, what she would tell you is, I am talking to someone. That means that we're not even a couple yet. But just so I don't get cross the lines, and just so I can focus on him, I'm not going to give you my number.
And I would say again that is a reflection of men, because men are more willing to accept a woman who has a boyfriend. He even talks about it in this video, where he says he met a woman who has a boyfriend, but yet he's still messing around with her. And so back in the days, Like when I was like probably back in like when he's referring to, we're both just about the same age. I'm 41, and back in the days, that's exactly how it was because the men were different. Men didn't tolerate that. Men weren't out there basically acting dirty towards one another. It was much more of a brotherhood. It's why a lot of times we refer to each other as brothers, right? And most men, more I should say, more men acted that way towards one another, and it was probably because most of us came from a family background where most of those individuals went to church. And so we grew up with a lot of those principles basically ingrained. And so we didn't act that way. And so as we left the church and then we started having kids, now that sort of regular inculcating, that constant dripping of biblical principles that you should avoid, like cheating on people and stealing, etc. A lot of these biblical principles that is actually taught within a lot of the red pill content creators. A lot of what the red pill content creators talk about is actually already spoken of in the Bible. It's just especially nowadays that a lot of young men don't even read the Bible. A lot of this information about how to be a strong, assertive male that you learn growing up in the church, like old school church, not the churches that exist today. But a lot of what you learned back then, where you heard scriptures where a woman is to be silent, you heard scriptures like a man is the head of the household, and you heard a lot of this stuff growing up from basically from the time that you were a kid to the time that you became a man and you started looking for a wife. And of course, the women heard the exact same thing. That's why you typically, even till this day, women typically want leaders. They want men who, in essence, are leaders, and that goes way back into the old principles that were taught back in the day.
Now, of course, if she had high enough interest, I guess anything is possible. But by and large, that's what a woman told you back in the day when she was just talking to a dude. They weren't even in a committed relationship. What society has told women now is, if you're not in a committed relationship, date as many men as possible. You know what that causes, guys? That causes a paradox of choice. Some
And the irony is that he talks about this statement about a paradox of choices as if this doesn't have an impact on men. When all you do is sleep around and you go from woman to woman to woman and you sleep around or you spin plates or you have a rotation, it does the exact same thing for you as it does for men. So it's just ironic that, and many content creators, many red pill content creators talk about this exact same thing, that it makes it difficult for women to settle down with any individual. It does the exact same thing for men. Women are just a reflection of what the men are today.
guy, he came up with that. He called it the paradox of choice. You guys can Google it. And what the paradox of choice is, guys, is when you give somebody too many options, they can't make a choice. When I set up my Teesprings clothing store and they tell you to select the colors, do you guys know what they told me? They told me, do not select too many colors, because if you do, the customer won't be able to make a choice. And if they can't make a choice, they won't buy nothing. Now, that's what they told me on Teespring. And that's exactly what you got going on now with all this social media and stuff like that. So it really don't matter where you go. Unless they ain't got social media in overseas or dating apps overseas, you're going to run into the same fucking issue.
And I would say that is more than likely true. You shouldn't be dating, you shouldn't be going out and meeting women via social media. You know, it's much easier to meet women, especially overseas. It's much easier meeting women just randomly walking up to people, whether you do day game or night game, going out to clubs, bars. It's very easy. I mean, as long as either you speak the language or they speak English, typically it's much easier, especially if you're in shape. I've traveled to many different countries, primarily settling on Latin America now, because like I said, my goal is to eventually move for that reason, to go out, being in a better dating environment. And of course, if I wanted to have a family, especially in many of these countries where the laws are not like how they are here in America, where the laws are just shit for men who want to get married, and at any point in time she can just basically leave and just take half your shit with her. In many of these Latin American countries, the dating laws, or I should say the marriage laws, are old school, like they used to be in America, 50 years ago, is how they are overseas. And so if you're someone who is looking to actually have a relationship, that's possible, especially because financially you're protected if you're a dual citizen, because your finances will be here in the state. Let's say, for example, if you have a bank account or you have investments here in the stock market and you draw like dividends, right? You get a lot of your income comes from dividends. Maybe you have YouTube, or you do Twitch, or you have an online business, etc., but your money is in another country. It in essence is protected from being extracted by the woman, typically in other countries most of the time. And again, if that's your goal, if that's your goal, then that's what you should go there for. One of the biggest mistakes I typically see, especially everybody talks about Colombia. I've been to Colombia, Panama, um, a lot of different countries out here, and Colombia is very nice. And no matter where I go, typically when I come across American men, or when I look at comments in YouTube sections by other Americans, and they're like, "Oh yeah, when I go out there, I'm gonna bring X amount of money. I'm gonna drop money out there when I go out there." And that's one of the problems, is that most men lead with their finances. That's always a big mistake, whether you live here in America or whether you're going to be dating abroad. If you lead primarily with your finances, you will always meet the wrong people. I've never had to go out and spend a lot of money. Even when I go out for a couple of weeks, I typically bring a couple $100s with me, and I always come back with money, because I usually don't spend a lot of money when I go out there. Even though I go out every single day, I go out and travel, I'll do sightseeing, I'll go out to the club. Like, typically go clubbing and dancing every night that I go out, and I usually go for like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month if I have the time. And I typically don't break bread a lot when I go out there. I typically don't spend a lot when I go out there. For the most part, I just work on myself, stay in shape, get used to talking to people, and then just realize what AMS talks about abundance mindset. One of the biggest things that I did want to bring out is that with what many Americans don't, what many American men don't realize, is that when you leave America, obesity is nowhere near the rates like it is here. Like, here, it's like 70% of dating age women who are like 20 to like 40, like 70% of them are obese. So if you're a guy who's in shape, the vast majority of the women that you're going to come in contact with are obese. And so the women that you might find yourself attracted to, who are typically on the skinnier side, are few and far between by comparison to the rest of the population. And so what that does is that it artificially causes a higher degree of competition between trying to compete for women, basically, who are on the skinnier side. Not even referring to whether they're a 5, 6, or 7. I just mean a woman who isn't like on the obese side, right? Because it's like 60-70% here in the States. But when you go overseas, you don't see obesity like that. And so the vast majority of the women, I would say, especially when I've gone to places like Panama, Colombia, when I went to what's it called, Buenos Aires, a lot of the women that you will come in contact with on a regular basis at the grocery store, at the airport, at the supermarket, most of these women are in really good shape. And so because most of those women are in really good shape, they have to compete a little bit more, because they're just not skirting by with how they look, because there's so many of them to choose from. And so that's why you find more femininity outside of the United States. Because within the United States, because so few of them are in shape, right? So because so few of them are in shape, they don't have to work at doing anything more than just showing up. But when you go overseas, one of the things I disagree with AMS, but this is going to be a long video, I don't want it to get any longer, but I would definitely say, for most men who are looking for overseas, I would say, if your goal is relationship and family life, don't take the habits here of sleeping around, of spending money and thinking you need to lead with your money. The most important thing is just be yourself. Obviously, take care of yourself, be fit, be in shape, and have a way of supporting yourself. You will find, as like in droves, there's so many women that I've met that are young, and they're like 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, that are like, I'm looking for a husband. I'm not someone who's just like, I just want to date and I'm looking to hang out, you will find scores of young, beautiful women who are looking to settle down. By comparison, you will not find that. In the United States, it's very few, and if ever, by comparison. And I would definitely say, if you're going to go there, don't take the problems that are here in the States and bring them with you abroad.